I want to talk specifically tonight about General O.P. Smith. To my surprise, a surprising number of people don't know that he commanded at Chosin. A lot of people, even Marines, think that Chesty Puller somehow was in command there. And O.P. Smith strikes me as a great example of American generalship. In Korea, in the fall of 1950, O.P. Smith was commander of the 1st Marine Division. He was ordered to attack and go all the way to the Chinese border. There's a saying you might have heard that the essence of generalship is what you do before the battle begins. That's certainly the case with General Smith at Chosin. He made 3 important decisions at the very beginning. Interestingly, all 3 grew out of his deep distrust of General Almond and General MacArthur. The 3 decisions. First, he insisted on consolidating his forces so they could support each other. And this meant moving the 5th Marines from the east side of the reservoir over to the west side, and turning the eastern side of the reservoir over to the Army. Second, he made it a top priority to have his engineers scrape out 2 airstrips in the frozen ground. This was an incredibly important move. It meant that when things got rough and they were isolated and surrounded, he could fly in supplies and reinforcements and fly out as wounded. Not having the wounded encumbering him meant that he could conduct a far more effective retreat because the wounded slow you down. Ultimately, 4,300 wounded were flown out in just the 5 days that the airstrip was operational. It opened the afternoon of December 1, 1950, with the engineers at the end of the airstrip occasionally under fire and firing back as they worked. And it closed the evening of December 6, when the Marines retreated out of the base. Third, Smith physically located himself at what he believed, correctly, would be the key point in the battle. American forces at Chosin resemble kind of a giant Y. You have the Marines on the west side of the reservoir, the Army on the east side, and they come together at the junction of the Y at a place called Hagaru. Hagaru, Smith said, the junction point of the Y, right there in the middle, had to be held at all cost. So in the morning of November 28th, 1950, Smith left his rear headquarters and he flew to that junction. General Almond came to see him. "We've got to go barreling up that road," Almond said in his headquarters. Smith bit his tongue. When General Almond left, he turned to his staff and he said, "We're not going anywhere until I get this division together and the airfield built." Smith also wrote a personal letter to the Commandant of the Marine Corps, putting his case on the record. And I quote from it here: "Our left flank is wide open. I have little confidence in the tactical judgment of 10 Corps or in the realism of their planning. There is a continual splitting up of units, an assignment of missions which puts them out on a limb. I think had O.P. Smith not made hard decisions, and likely risked his career, that the Marine Force might have been wiped out." Indeed, Omar Bradley, then chairman of the Joint Chiefs, told a Marine officer on the Joint Staff that he was assuming that the 1st Marine Division was gone. It would have been easier for Smith to follow his orders. In fact, General Shepard, his superior in the Marine Corps, had told him, he said, "O.P., go along with Almond, listen to him." Smith refused, and he did this very difficult thing for a commander. He did what he thought was the right thing rather than explicitly follow his orders. If he had followed his orders, it would have been the greatest military disaster in our history. There would have been perhaps 10,000 Marines lost, perhaps more. That's Little Bighorn times 50. Think of the implications of that. If the 1st Marine Division had been wiped out, it would have been a great military victory for communism, and the course of the Korean War would have been far different. I see 2 possible alternatives. The first was that, as the Joint Chiefs were recommending and MacArthur was talking, that U.S. forces would have been withdrawn from the Korean Peninsula and Korea today would be entirely communist. And I think North Korea is probably the worst place in the world to live. The entire peninsula would be like that. I think the United States, had it withdrawn from Korea, might well have retreated into continental isolationism. The other prospect is they would have followed Douglas MacArthur's other wish list and used what he said, perhaps 36 nuclear weapons to attack China. He wanted to embargo Chinese ports, bomb Chinese airfields, and he thought it would be a neat idea to move Chinese nationalist forces to Korea. Neither of these prospects is appealing, isolationism or nuclear warfare against China. The Chinese, by the way, suffered huge losses at Chosin. Out of the 12 divisions that attacked Smith's division, they suffered 25,000 killed, 12,000 wounded, and tens of thousands of additional casualties from frostbite. The 12 divisions were withdrawn from the front until March of the following year. It was a tactical defeat for the Chinese, but it was a strategic victory. The Communist Chinese, this new government that had just taken over in Beijing, had taken on the world's most powerful country and forced it to retreat.
I was an assistant secretary of the Army, and we did the Be All You Can Be campaign that lasted for 21 years and transformed the face of the U.S. Army. And that leads to the other three questions on the same subject. Are you in favor of the draft? When should Congress declare war? And what is your take on the all-volunteer force?
First of all, Be All You Can Be was a great motto because it spoke to the ethos of the time, yet conveyed a sense that of what the Army could do for you. And it really was enormously effective. You have this great rebuilding of the Army out of the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War destroyed the United States Army. It had to be recreated. It had to reconnect itself. They retrained the force, they re-equipped the force, and most importantly, they had to come up with a new way to man the force. The all-volunteer force has been enormously successful. I would argue, and no hit on you, you did a great job in it, I would argue too successful. We are now at the point where we can wage wars and nobody needs to pay attention because the American people no longer have skin in the game. This is a phrase I had to teach my left-wing sister after her son joined the Marines. You got skin in the game, she'd say? And I say, yeah, that's right. Just say it that way. The problem is with the 1% fighting our wars, the 99% not paying attention, American people no longer much care about military affairs, don't pay attention, even when we're waging war, even when we're killing people overseas and losing people. They don't know how to judge generals or military competence. And so everybody thinks they support the troops, but one way to support the troops is by asking generals tough questions. And the Congress doesn't know how to do that anymore. So I would like to see a draft, if only to reconnect people to the military, to have a sense of skin in the game. Now, I don't think you have to have a Vietnam-style draft. I think you could do an alternative, which would be, you sign up for the draft, you get drafted, and you get a great benefits package, free college, and a lot of concessionary loans from the U.S. government, like mortgage loans and so on, rest of your life. Option B, you don't want to be in the military? Not a problem. National service. You bring meals to elderly shut-ins, you clean up the inner city, you work as an assistant to a janitor in a New York City school. And you come out with slightly longer service, slightly less benefits. Some college loans, but not a free ride. But we have a great libertarian tradition in this country. Not a problem. Tell Uncle Sam to take a hike. You just check the libertarian option. Just don't ask Uncle Sam for anything. No college loans, no federal mortgage guarantees, no nothing. You can drive on our roads, you can call the fire department, you can enjoy police protection because you pay taxes. But basically, you're off Uncle Sam's plate. And you decided at age 50 you made a mistake, fine. Come in and drive a general around for a year. I think this is a pipe dream, but I don't have a better way of reconnecting the military to society, and it worries me a lot. I think it's morally reckless to be a great democracy that wages war and does not pay attention to it.
Please contrast Bob Gates and Leon Panetta and Don Rumsfeld? And do you think Panetta is now a good Secretary of Defense for our military as it stands?
I don't know Panetta well. I have not covered him actively, covering the Defense Department. Honestly, people would ask me questions about Panetta, and I'd say, I can talk to you about Terry Allen commanding the 1st Infantry Division in 1943, a lot more than I can talk to you about Panetta. I mean, I was off in the archives. I was thinking about this the other day, though. I covered the Pentagon for a long time, and I was thinking about the background of the 3 best defense secretaries I saw. The 3 best were Dick Cheney, William Perry, and Bob Gates. Now, Dick Cheney begins life as a politician, kind of becomes a federal executive, and then goes into corporate America. So a varied background. Bill Perry is an academic and a venture capitalist. Bob Gates is a career bureaucrat and intelligence officer, intelligence analyst. The commonality I saw was the varied background, and this goes to the Obama administration, not just Panetta, but the narrowness of background of the Obama National Security Team. This is the only time I can remember in American history where the entire National Security Team comes out of the US Congress. President Obama, Vice President Biden, Secretary of State Clinton, Secretary of Defense Panetta are all former members of Congress. And the National Security Advisor and his deputy are both former Hill staffers. Narrowness in background of any sort is not good. It smells to me a little bit of the Kennedy administration, where they were all smart guys from Harvard who were smarter than everybody else. And don't tell them they were wrong about Vietnam, because you must be a coward if you disagree with them. I think this creates a blind spot, a vulnerability in our national security establishment. How it hurts us, I don't know. But when I see people talking about John Kerry as Defense Secretary, I start thinking about moving to Canada.